this video in which we'll sew together the Osaka cross-back apron pattern. This is a one-size-fits-all apron pattern for adults that can be put on simply by passing the head and arms through the apron's crossed straps. It's suitable for both men and women, covering the back to a greater or lesser extent depending on your build. The apron is wide enough to allow you to cook without getting dirty. But it can also be used for other manual activities such as ceramics or gardening. The apron features a large practical pocket that can be personalized with cotton wool strips. This pocket can also be compartmentalized with simple vertical stitching through the layers to create multiple pockets for utensils, as on this brown linen version. This apron is of course useful and practical, but it's also beautiful thanks to its meticulous finishes. All the seams enclose the seam allowances for an impeccable finish. You have hems in the middle of the back and at the bottom, French seams on the side seams, finishing tapes cut in the bias on the armholes and facings at the top of the apron, back panels and top of the pocket. The finishing tape and facings are made in the same fabric, but could also be made in a contrasting fabric if desired. The skill level is intermediate. In fact, the model presents no real technical difficulty. The intermediate skill level lies in the finishing touches, which require particular attention to detail. You need to take your time and apply yourself for the pocket and finishing touches, front and back facing, assembly of the French seams and fitting of the finishing tapes. The key is to iron every step of the way. It's not difficult, and a motivated beginner can do it with the help of this video. As for fabrics to use, we recommend warp and weft fabrics such as poplin, chambray, denim, jacquard, or linen, which is perfect for an apron. Medium-weight washed linen, around 230 grams per square meter, is particularly suitable for this type of project and will give you a very high-quality finish. Fabrics can be plain or printed, or woven with checks or stripes. You could mix two fabrics, one for the apron and one for finishes such as facing and finishing tape, or use the same fabric for everything, as indicated in the requirements chart. As for supplies, all you'll need as an option are ribbons of cotton twill 1 centimeter wide, which you can easily find in haberdashery or on our online store in 3 colors. They're thin and supple and very easy to apply. For the sewing equipment, cross-back aprons can be sewn entirely on a conventional sewing machine. No need for a serger. In terms of small sewing equipment, you'll need classic scissors or a rotary cutter to cut the fabric pieces, small precision scissors for finishes, a classic ruler and optionally a paper, cardboard or metal ruler to iron your hems and techs, a textile pen or chalk, optionally a temporary glue stick to hold the cotton wool ribbons to be applied. You'll also need pins and needles suited to your fabric. I recommend 90-gauge universal needles to suit poplin, chambray, light denim or linen. Finally, you'll need sewing thread, which I recommend in polyester for its strength. We'll use straight stitch for the seams, with a stitch length of 2.5 for assembly and 3 for top stitching. We made different versions of the apron, which I'm going to present to you now. We start with the brown linen apron, embellished with 3 applied stripes of black cotton twill. Then we have the same version in powder pink wash linen, again with ribbons of black twill. Finally, we have a version in striped chambray, without ribbons, with the pocket worked in the opposite direction of the stripe to create a graphic effect. First, we'll iron a 1 centimeter wrong side together tuck on the following pieces. At the bottom of the front-facing piece and the back facings, this is on the widest part, which flares out, and at the bottom of the pocket facing. I'll show you on a piece. To iron the 1 centimeter tuck wrong sides together, we'll use a sewing ruler or a piece of cardboard that we've previously graduated with a pen. Using the ruler, we fold the edge over 1 centimeter and iron, forming the tuck as we go. Repeat on the indicated pieces. For the finishing tape, fold one length wrong sides together for 1 centimeter and then fold the other length over the first for 1 centimeter. Iron to hold in place. Repeat on the other finishing tape. For the back facings, we'll also iron a 1 centimeter wrong side to back tuck at a slight bias binding. We continue with the back pieces. Ironing a 1 cm tuck on the middle back edge, wrong side together, at the vertical edge, not the slightly diagonal one. Then iron a second tuck of 1 cm again. Finally, repeat on the other back piece. We'll now prepare the straps. I've already folded them, but I'll show you how. Fold the straps in half lengthwise, one at a time, with wrong sides together, and iron. Then open the strap piece and fold the two edges towards the center fold, and iron. Check that the two ticks are aligned and correct with an iron if necessary. A word of clarification. On this plain linen, right side and wrong side are identical, so I choose one of the two sides to be the wrong side. But on the striped chambray here, you can clearly see the wrong side from the right side. All that's left is to pin each strap along the two shaped tucks and top stitch, as I've already done here, on each side 2 mm from the edges. Here's the result of my two ready straps. Careful iron. If you've chosen the option with applied cotton wool ribbons, you'll mark the position of the ribbons to be applied with a textile pen or chalk. You can apply 1, 2, or 3 strips as in our example, starting 4 centimeters from the edge of the right height, on the right side. Draw one line, then a second at 1 centimeter. And then repeat at intervals of 1.5 centimeters between each strip drawn. We'll cut strips of 25 centimeters each. You can either use temporary textile glue, which is really practical and quick. Then place the ribbon between the reference lines and pin. If you don't have glue, the trick is to add lots of pins. Note that for the glue option, I still recommend placing a few pins. Next, stitch 2 mm from the edge of the ribbon. I'll show you on the machine for one ribbon only, which I glued and then pinned with a few pins. We're going to use coordinated thread on the spool in black, here because I've chosen strips of black twill, and on the bobbin, a thread coordinated with my fabric. I'm going to stitch 2 mm from the edge of the ribbons. To do this, I adjust the needle position by shifting it and test. I've got it. I can sew by starting with a few back and forth stitches, then straight stitch. I can stitch through the pins or remove them just before going over them. At the bottom of my ribbon, I leave the needle stuck in the fabric, lift the presser foot, rotate my work 90 degrees and lower the presser foot to continue. I finish the stitching at the top of the strip with a few back and forth stitches. I'll obviously repeat on the other two ribbons. Here it's finished. I've applied 3 strips of 1 centimeter wide cotton twill. The excess ribbon ends are trimmed off by cutting flush with the edges. All that's left is to iron the whole thing. We have to iron 1 centimeter text on the wrong side and bottom of the pocket. The pocket is now formed by aligning right sides together, the top edge of the pocket and that of the pocket facing, as well as the side edges. The pocket side ticks are enfolded, but not the bottom facing tuck. Pin and stitch 1 centimeter apart in straight stitch, with back and forth stitches at the beginning and end of the stitch. That's it. Notch off the corners at the seam allowances and turn the facing wrong sides together, tucking in the sides. Iron and pin the bottom of the facing. Top stitch the bottom of the facing 2 mm from its edge. All that remains is to place the pocket according to the markings on the front of the apron. Personally, I like to check that my pocket is centered by measuring the distance between the pocket edges and the side selvages. I adjust if necessary. Then we pin with the side and bottom text well shaped. Next, top stitch the pocket, starting with a few stitches back and forth at the beginning of the stitching, or stitches that form a triangle for a solid pocket entry. Stitch along the pocket at 2 mm and continue stitching down and across, leaving the needle planted at each corner, before lifting the presser foot and rotating the work 90 degrees. Then lower the foot and continue top stitching. Once you've reached the top of the pocket, finish with a few back and forth back stitches, or again with a triangle seam. I'll also show you an option on this striped chambray version. You can add 1 or more vertical top stitches to compartmentalize the pocket and insert kitchen utensils, for example. I did it here for this apron on which I decided to sew a pocket with the stripes in the other direction. All you have to do is choose the width of each compartment by indicating the marks at equidistant top and bottom. drawing a line with a textile pen and top stitching with a back and forth stitch at the beginning and end of the stitch. We will start assembling the front piece with a back piece. We'll create French seams on the sides using the 1.5 centimeters seam allowances included in the pattern. Align the front and back edges with wrong sides together. For the back piece, it's the downward flaring edge that needs to be aligned with the front side edge. Pin and stitch right side up, 5 millimeters from the edge. To do this, align the presser fit with the edge and shift the needle slightly to the right to reduce the distance. Stitch with a 2.5 millimeter stitch, starting with a stop stitch at the beginning and end. Now that it's stitched, trim the seam allowance to around 3 millimeters. Next, iron the seam allowances on the front or back. Then fold the front and back right sides together to carefully press the seam. You can then hold in place with a few pins. To finish the French seams, stitch on the wrong side, 1 centimeter from the edge to enclose the seam allowances previously made. Always using a back and forth stitch at the beginning and end of the seam. Now you're stitched. It's time to repeat the steps in symmetry with the other front edge and the side edge of the other back piece, which I've already done on my side. Here's the result of the French seams, with an impeccable finish on the wrong side. Place one end of a shoulder strap right sides together with the front to the top between the two marks, aligning the edges together and pinning. Then place the other end of the strap right sides together at the top edge of the opposite back piece, again between the two pattern marks, and pin. Repeat with the other strap in symmetry. Finally, stitch each end of the strap in the seam allowances, 5 millimeters from the edge, with the tags in the middle back piece well unfolded so that they don't get caught in the seam. The two straps are sewn at their ends. We'll now prepare the finishes with the finishing tape and facing. Open the finishing tape and align the edge of one tape with right sides together on the apron, starting at the upper armhole mark. Pin along the armhole edge to the second mark on the back. Cut off the excess band after the mark. Stitch and straight stitch along the fold 1 centimeter from the edge. Repeat symmetrically on the other side with the other finishing tape. These are the two stitched finishing tapes. Iron the strips outwards. Now it's time for the facing. Align the facing piece edges right sides together at the top of the front apron. Pin with a 1 centimeter tuck from the bottom of the facing still formed. The straps are sandwiched between the apron and facing. Stitch along the facing, 1 centimeter from the edges. I'll show you. We'll stitch 1 centimeter from the top, starting at the point that's flush with the seam of the finishing tape, then at 1 centimeter from the top, along the shoulder strap in fact. Leave the needle planted in the fabric, lift a presser foot to rotate the work around the needle until the side of the presser foot is parallel to the top edge at 1 centimeter. Lower the presser foot and continue stitching at the top. Once again, stop 1 centimeter from the other corner and proceed in the same way. Leave the needle planted, lift the foot, rotate in the direction of the side and lower the foot to continue stitching 1 centimeter from the edge to the bottom of the facing and front, with the tuck still formed. Stop the stitching along the seam of the finishing tape with a few back and forth stitches. Once the stitching is complete, trim off the corners by cutting into the seam allowance, 2 millimeters from the seam but without cutting the seam. Mark the corners and turn the facing wrong sides together, marking the corners with a scissor tip, punch, or bamboo tip. Note that the finishing tape will fold up and be carried to the wrong side of the apron. Using precision scissors, the seam allowances at the bottom of the facing are trimmed a little, and the facing is ironed on the front, then pinned in place. Iron then pin. Fold the finishing tape to the wrong side of the apron, then carefully pin it to the wrong side of the armhole and iron. Leave the bottom unpinned as we still need to assemble the facing on the back. Repeat symmetrically on the other armhole. We still need to assemble the facing on the back. We start by aligning the top facing with the top of the back, right sides together. The bottom facing is always tucked in. The height of the facing with tuck is aligned with the side seam of the apron, while the opposite height, without tuck, is 1 centimeter before the mid-back apron edge and 1 centimeter after the shoulder strap. Pin along and stitch along the strap and up. I'll show you with the machine. Stitch through the layers, starting along the side seam 1 centimeter from the edge with a back and forth stitch and working your way to the end of the strap. Leave the needle planted in the fabric, raise the presser foot. Turn the work 90 degrees and lower the presser foot to continue stitching along the mid-back height, 2 centimeters from the mid-back edge. 1 centimeter from the facing edge, which stops beforehand. Be careful not to catch the strap in the seam at this point. When you reach the bottom of the facing, you should be aligned with a fold of the mid-back tuck. Stop the stitching with a back and forth stitch. Once stitched, trim off the corners and seam allowances as well as the facing seam allowance at the bottom of the facing. Turn the work wrong side together, marking the corner with a point. Iron carefully. In the middle, the double tuck is sandwiched between the layers. And on the other side, the finishing tape is also sandwiched between the layers. Shape the ticks on both sides and iron again. Finally, pin to hold everything in place at the back facing. Then at the bottom half of the finishing tape, which must be carefully folded and pinned. Repeat symmetrically on the other back with the other back facing. If the fabric yawns in certain places, you'll need to iron and pin more to distribute the fabric, which may relax a little, especially linens, which often have a slightly open weave. Here's the result of complete pinning of the front and back facings and finishing tapes, which now need to be top stitched and straight stitch with a stitch length of 3. First, we'll top stitch the bottom of the facings with back and forth stitches at the beginning and end of the stitching. Top stitch the bottom of the front and back facings. With the bottom of the facings sewn, top stitch the armholes to the wrong side of the apron, 2 mm from the edge, always starting with back stitches from the bottom of the front facing, and continuing along the finishing tape to the side seam. Continue slowly until you reach 1 stitch on the back facing and pivot to finish the seam just at the edge in the side seam previously made, down to the bottom of the back facing. Repeat in symmetry. Here's the result of top stitching. If you have a few folds at the armholes, iron carefully. Reform and press again if necessary. The double tuck at a mid-back edge. Then pin along the entire length, stopping 15 centimeters from the bottom, and repeat on the other back piece. We've now ironed a 1 centimeter wrong sides together tuck at the bottom of the apron all the way through, then a second tuck of 4 centimeters this time. You'll need to iron extremely carefully, as the bottom is slightly rounded and it's not necessarily easy to hem 4 centimeters on a rounded edge. So iron well. Unfold a tuck in the center backs and fold the hem of the apron right sides together at the vertical fold. I'll show you again. Pin and stitch at 1 centimeter above the hem along the fold and repeat symmetrically on the other side. Here's the result once the 2 hem heights have been stitched. Trim off the corners and seam allowances. Then turn the hem right side out. Mark the corner with a tack. The double ticks in the middle backs firm again and are caught between the layers. Replace a few pins to hold the bottom of the double tuck of each back piece in place. Repeat on the other center back. Finally, pin the bottom hem as well. I still have to trim off my other corner. Finish by top stitching all along the back middle edges, 8 mm from the edge, then top stitching the bottom hem 3.8 centimeters from the bottom edge. Your Osaka crossback apron is finished. It's a bit of work, but the result is worth it, as the finishes are really beautiful. We've sewn versions with or without the ribbons, and frankly, I love them both. We hope you'll be pleased with your creation too. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to our channel. We can't wait to see your versions. So join us on Instagram with #Ikatee Osaka. See you soon at Ikatee.